Joining us now on the debate for the full hour tonight, Kathleen Wynne. She's Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing and the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs. Thomas Decker, Reverend at the Metropolitan Community Church of Toronto and former gay community liaison for the Toronto Police Service. And Jean-Paul Bevilacqua is a series panelist on MTV Canada's One Girl, Five Gays. I want to thank all of you for coming on the program tonight, and we are having this debate, I think it's fair to say tonight, in large part because of something that a guy named Rick Mercer said on his program this past week. Roll tape.
Every year in this country, 300 kids take their own lives. It is a mind-boggling number. And this past week, one of those kids was Jamie Hubley. He was 15, he was depressed, and he happened to be gay. And because this is 2011, we just don't read about a kid like Jamie, we can Google him. And then the next thing you know, you're sitting at home watching his videos on YouTube. And he was gay, all right. He was a great, big, goofy, gay kid singing Lady Gaga on the internet. And as an adult, you look at that and you go, you know what? That kid's going places. But for some reason, some kids, they looked at that and they attacked. And now he's gone. And because this story is all too familiar, we know exactly what's going to happen next. Grief counselors will go into the school as they should. But what about the old-fashioned assembly? You know, where the cops show up and there's hell to pay and they find out who's responsible. You know, like when the lunchroom is vandalized. Because the kids who bullied this boy, they know who they are. And more importantly, other kids know who they are.
Let's just start by exploring how familiar this story actually is. So Thomas, to you first. Did you experience all sorts of bullying when you were a young kid growing up?
Oh, God, yes.
You did?
Yes.
Where'd you grow up?
I was born in Europe, but I grew up in Australia. And actually, when I was 16 years old, I was walking home in Brisbane. And I was walking through an area of Brisbane called Fortitude Valley. And all I remember was a sharp pain. And I woke up a few hours later in hospital, and someone had taken a shovel to my head. And apparently, the only thing I remember is there's this gay.
That's what you heard?
That's what I heard. That's what I heard.
And then you got hit over the head with a shovel?
Yeah, and I still got the scars to prove them.
How long ago did that happen?
Do I need to tell my age now? That was in 81.
1981?
1981. Yeah.
30 years ago, and it still obviously stays with you.
Yes, certainly has.
Jean-Paul, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't experience anything quite as physical but growing up, but I definitely had verbal abuse. I remember walking up to the plate during one gym class and here comes limp wrist up to the plate during high school. A couple years ago, during university, I had slurs thrown at me walking home one night after being out with my friends, just very violent, very homophobic slurs. So
where is this?
That particular experience happened in downtown Toronto, Bay and Dundas.
Bay and Dundas and downtown Toronto.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you grew up where?
I grew up in Ottawa, and I was born in Toronto, though.
Is it mostly guys or mostly girls who do this kind of stuff?
You know what was surprising to me was that group was a mixture of young girls, in their early 20s, and young guys, and equal participants, equally hateful, which kind of broke a ton of stereotypes for me in terms of, who these hateful people are.
I'm not sure this question works as well with you because I think you came out so much later in life.
I was old. I was 37.
You were 37 when you came out.
I was 37 when I came out, so
you didn't
it
have
was
the
around
high school
1990.
experience.
I didn't have the high school experience, but when I look back on high school and the people who I then later knew were gay, there was a code of silence, and I'm sure they experienced bullying. And certainly when I came out, I know that my children experienced, whether it was bullying, but there was discrimination and there were taunts and there was teasing.
They got teased
that went
about
on.
it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Did you get teased or taunted by other adults in any circumstances?
Well, I think when you come out when you're 37 and you're a fairly confident person and you've lived with privilege, I mean, you've lived with heterosexual privilege and other kinds of privilege, it meant my experience was different. But what did happen was people said things to me like, well, maybe you should move to Riverdale. I lived in North Toronto. Riverdale.
What did that mean?
Exactly. Maybe you should move downtown. Maybe you should go
where all the gay people
where
are.
all the gay people are. They're not in North Toronto, really. You don't want to move here. You don't want to stay here.
Your friend said that to you?
That was said to me, and yeah, and also when I went to run for office, it was suggested that really I couldn't win in a North Toronto riding. You know, I couldn't win in an uptown riding. I needed to be somewhere else, and there were people who avoided me, and I definitely felt the change when I came out. So. That was very instructive to me.
I guess, I mean, if people haven't figured this out already, you had a very conventional, married to a man, had kids, kind of a life, right?
Absolutely.
For the first 3.5 decades of your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I grew up in Richmond Hill. I don't think I heard the word lesbian the whole time I was growing up. It just wasn't part of the lexicon. I'm 58 years old, so it was, it was not something that was part of my life. And I think there's a continuum of homosexuality. That's my personal belief. And so it wasn't something that I was aware of as a little kid in myself. And I grew into that and experienced that coming out later in life.
Thomas, you obviously have dealings with this community and with young people today. Is it easier today to be gay than it would have been when you were growing up?
I think to a certain extent it is easier, but it also may be a little more difficult now because it is being talked about so much more. So there is more. When I was growing up, there was this code of silence. You just would not speak about it. And as a young gay man, you tried as hard as possible to avoid making any reference to any gay issues.
How old were you when you knew you were?
Probably 11,
So this
12 years old. But again, it was this period in my life where I wasn't quite sure who I was. I didn't go to bed as a 10-year-old kid and then woke up the next morning knowing, okay, now I'm gay. It didn't work that way. There was a year and a half of trying to find out, questioning who you are, and questioning your feelings, and and during that time, well, I didn't learn at school about gay issues. There was nothing at home about gay issues. Although later on, I found out that I had wonderfully accepting parents, but as I was growing up, the ones that you love, you probably know the least in that sense. So I was always afraid to share these feelings. And nowadays, gay issues are being talked in school. They are being talked about in the media. We have television shows.
Hold that thought, because we're going to come back to the educational angle in a little bit. But I want to find out, you're sorry, I don't know how old you are. How old are you?
23.
23. So you're not that far removed from high school.
No.
Do you imagine that even though it's only been a few years since you left high school, it may actually be easier to be gay in high school today?
You know what? It's interesting because there's been so much progress in terms of changes in the law, but it's interesting because that doesn't necessarily reflect changes in societal thought. There is still so much stigma, shame surrounding being gay, being lesbian, being transgendered. It may be more open, but I don't know that the reaction from people is necessarily any better. Yeah.
So it's a deep taboo. I remember when I came out to my dad. My dad's a general practitioner, and he practiced in Richmond Hill. And when I came out to him, he said, Kath, it's a deep taboo. And he had been one of the general practitioners in Richmond Hill who actually had gay patients come up from the city in the 50s and 60s and 70s because they knew he was a safe doctor, and he would treat them with respect and would treat them at all. But that's not something I knew as a kid growing up. So there was lots of silence, but I can remember him saying that it was, it was easier, you talk about the code of silence, Tom, it was easier to be a lesbian in a small town like Richmond Hill because two sisters or not two sisters, but two aunts or, people who were friends could live together, share a house. That wasn't questioned. But if two men lived together, there was an automatic suspicion of who they were. So, so I think that although things have changed, it's not, there isn't that code of silence, so people who were living their lives and were able to live their lives and not be questioned, that's not there so much. And kids, there's a light shone on it. So in the kids who are struggling the way you were, Tom, you know, and just trying to figure out who you are, there isn't as much time for that sometimes, and that can be hard, depending on where you live and depending on who your parents are, and that goes to the surrounding factors in a kid's life.
And I like to always liken my experience growing up to, in a sense, growing up disabled. Not disabled by the fact that I'm gay, not disabled by my homosexuality, but by the fact that I had to grow up gay in a straight world. And that, if you will, rendered me, made me the person that I am. And it took years and years and years later on coming to terms and finding my own stand, finding out who I was, and that I was just as equally loved as someone else, and that I had every right to be who I am. But that takes time.
Yeah. So much of this, of course, happens in high school. And, you know, we don't hear too many examples nowadays of people getting a shovel over the back of the head when they're walking down the street. But in high school, I want to know whether or not you think...
Sorry, I just need to stop, Steve, because
sure.
it starts way earlier than that. I just want to tell you a quick story.
Sure.
So I came out in 1990-ish. My daughter was in grade 4. A few years later, she's my youngest. She was home for lunch with a group of friends, and they were talking about their teacher and trying to figure out if their teacher were married. And they just didn't know where he fit. So they were asking all these questions. You know, do you live with somebody? Do you no? Do you have a cat? Yes. Do you know? And they narrowed it down to he must be gay, and they were having that conversation. And I was listening to them when I was making lunch, and I said, so who have you told this? Who have you talked to about this? You've figured this out. I said, have you talked to the other kids in the class? Well, yeah, but not the boys. I said, well, why didn't you tell the boys about this? And they said, well, the boys would be mean.
And this is how old?
9 years old.
9 years old?
9 years old.
The boys would be mean.
The boys would be mean to Mr. Right?
At the age of 9.
Yeah, starts early.
Do we do a little better today in the classroom, though, in terms of getting that anti-bullying message out there and letting people know that you can't pick on gay teens because this might happen?
Well, there's a lot of work that's been done, and I'm going to speak now as a member of the government and as a former Minister of Education. I was there when we put in place the equity and inclusive education policy. School boards are required to have equity policies. They're required to do training with their staff, and a lot of money has gone into that. We included bullying and cyberbullying in the list of behaviors for which suspension has to be considered. So we've made a lot of changes, but I don't think this is a statutory or a legal issue, because the Human Rights Code and the Charter of Rights and Freedom are the framework in which we're acting. We've got to continue to push on those regulatory mechanisms. We've got to keep training our staff and working with parent groups, but we've also got to look at the attitudinal environment that we're in and ask questions about what we can do outside of those institutions.
Jean-Paul, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just, what's interesting to me about the discussion of bullying is the language around it. I have a real difficulty sometimes with the term bullying. To me, it's so general, you know, it can mean a lot of things. I wonder why we're not saying assault, abuse, depression, homophobia. Where are those terms? Because those terms are real, they're concrete, they hit home, they hit hard. Whereas bullying, to me, is a little bit of a cop-out in terms of the discussion. I want real terms there, and that's what I think is maybe currently lacking, and maybe...
Well, I think we need to talk about homophobic bullying.
Right,
right?
Exactly.
Be specific, right?
Yeah, and bullying, the reason we use bullying is that it's that power imbalance and over time, right? So there's some specific aspects. Assault could be part of a bullying pattern, or it could be a one-off. Right? So I think you're right, we do need to define our terms, but often, and I agree with you, often bullying is used without the homophobic attached to it. And we need to, I think we need to push on that.
I want to just welcome another guest to our discussion tonight. In our nation's capital right now is Fred Litwin. He's the proprietor of the Gay and Right blog and president of the Free Thinking Film Society. And Fred, as I welcome you to the program, I wonder if you could just pick up on the discussion that we've been having here insofar as From what you know of what's going on in the high schools in the nation's capital nowadays, are we better at sending the message out that homophobic bullying, let's call it what it is not acceptable?
I think we've got a lot. I mean, things have improved greatly across the entire country. We've got to admit that. I mean, when I was growing up, things were a lot differently. The thing that's not being addressed here, I'd like to address, is the fact that teenage suicide is largely a male phenomenon. I mean, over two-thirds of males between 50, or suicides between 15 and 19 are males. And I'd like to see more talk about, do we need a male-specific policy to address this problem?
You obviously think we do.
I think we do. I think it's, and by the way, the lowest suicide rate of any age group in Canada is teenagers. The suicide rate for teenagers is far lower than the suicide rate for men in their 40s or 50s, 60s. Even men in their 90s have a higher suicide rate than teenagers.
Do we need
We
to
are
do
looking at a
something more
massive
specific on
male
this, Kathleen
problem.
Wynne?
Well, I think it goes to my point, the point that I made earlier about boy culture. And I think that it is something that we need to address. What the specific interventions should be, I think that's a conversation that we need to have. But I think boy culture around this issue is very, very problematic.
Your government last year did try to bring in some changes to the curriculum that included more quote-unquote gay positive experiences, examples, lessons at an earlier age. And it got shot down pretty hard, and as a result, the government retreated. What did you conclude from that episode?
Well, what we did was we pulled one piece of the curriculum, which is the physical and health education piece on sex education, and there's going to be more consultation on that. But what we didn't pull were the sections that would allow a teacher to talk about different sexual orientations, and in an age-appropriate way, because we know that creates a safer environment for children, both in the classroom and outside of the classroom. But your point is absolutely right. The reason there was that hullabaloo was because of homophobia. It was a homophobic response to a new curriculum that had been developed in consultation with parents, that had been developed in consultation around the province with educators, which is how curriculum gets written, right? So, so my concern with that reaction is that it wasn't actually named for what it was, you know? I don't think there was enough light shone on the fact that really there was a homophobic religious fundamentalist Christian who reacted to a lot of material that's already in the health and physical education curriculum in the schools and blew that out of proportion because of his own discomfort.
This is Reverend McVitie we're talking about?
Charles McVitie.
Charles McVitie.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about that criticism and why I had a bit of a problem was that it was under the umbrella of it not being age appropriate. So that was kind of the umbrella. It's not age appropriate, but really what's underneath that was the homophobia, right? That was kind of a term used. Oh, it's not age appropriate. Like, oh, okay, I guess that's the case. No, actually, it was just homophobic because sexuality has a lot more to do than just sex. You know, we teach tolerance, we teach acceptance in those courses too, and that is age appropriate.
Did you get, for lack of a better expression, gay sex ed when you were in high school?
No, I didn't.
Didn't get any. There was none of that kind of discussion?
No, and in my experience,
No.
the education I got was a very, from a very mainstream heteronormative perspective, and I felt personally alone in that. And, I'm sure I'm not the only one that did.
Fred, should we be having more sex ed acknowledging different kinds of people, different kinds of sexual orientations in our high schools today, including in our Catholic high
I think so
schools?
in our high schools. I think we have to be careful what age we do this at. You have to remember, we've had 2,000 years of religious teachings against homosexuality from all religions. We've come a long way in the last 30, 40 years. When I was in university, they were still rating gay bars, and now we have same-sex marriage. So it's not surprising you're going to have pockets of the population that are still a little uncomfortable with this. It's going to take a little more time. But we've made incredible strides and incredible progress.
I think one of the loaded words that we use is sex, right? So sex education. Let me give you an example. A 4-year-old child goes to kindergarten, and there's a lesson about families, and kids are drawing their families. If that 4-year-old child who didn't choose what family she was going to be born into happens to live in a family with 2 moms or a family with 2 dads, and she draws a picture of 2 moms or 2 dads, that teacher better understand, in my opinion, that that's a family just like all the other families in the classroom. And I will go farther to say that the moms in that family shouldn't have to go into the school and read the riot act to the principal and say, okay, my kid's coming to your school, there are 2 mothers, if she's ever harassed, you know, you're going to hear from me. She shouldn't have to do that. Right now, she may still have to do that. You know, in the province, she may still have to go into the principal and say, look, this is the situation, you need to let the teachers know. But 4-year-old kids,
how often is that happening, though?
It's happening.
I mean, you say it, but how often does that happen? I'd like to actually know.
Well, I don't know how often it's happening. I know that it's happening. And as the Minister of Education, one of the reasons that I really believed that we needed to bring the language of equity back into the school system, and the reason we needed to raise the awareness of the directors of education, was that that kind of thing was happening, and directors were saying, well, you know, we don't have a lot of gay kids in our schools. So I don't think that is the kind of awareness that we need in our school system in Ontario.
One of the problems I have here is that I'd like to see more data. If you look at the data of suicide between people between 15 and 19, it was 140 boys, 68 girls. Now, I'd like to see more data. It's over 2-to-1 in favor of the males. What's going on there? I mean, do we have a curriculum on bullying that addresses this male issue? Where are these people? Where do they live? Is it rural? Is it urban? Is it religious schools? Is it in the Catholic School Board? It's begging for some more hard data.
Sure, and there's more and more data being collected. I mean, one of the things that schools are required to do now is to administer school climate surveys and gather some data about how the kids are feeling in their own schools. And I think that's a lot of progress, you know. And so administrators.
I'd like to know how many suicides take place in rural Ontario as opposed to the city.
Fair enough.
Male, female. Let's get some hard data rather than just survey feelings.
Let me get some hard data from Jean-Paul here. Did you go to a public school or a Catholic school?
I went to a public and private school.
Public and private school.
Yeah.
Was it your sense that they both treated this issue in the same way?
Yeah, you know, pretty much. They all had a pretty cohesive curriculum when it came to sex education. I remember being educated every year and it being pretty cohesive between my public elementary school and my private high school. Yeah.
And did you have friends in the separate school system? I guess the thing I'm trying to figure out here is whether or not there is probably an assumption among the people watching us right now that the Catholic system has a lot less tolerance on this issue than does the publicly funded secular school system. I don't know if that's true, but I'd like to find out if that's true. I'm going to ask the former minister in a second. But if you have any firsthand experience, I'm happy to hear
I don't have
that.
firsthand experience, but I think that is a bit too much of a generalization. I think there can be acceptance and tolerance in some Catholic schools. I don't know. I don't know if I can make that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that is very clear to all of the directors of education in the province is that the policies of the Ministry of Education apply to everybody.
They do, but they're not always carried out by everybody.
No, but I think then that's where you get into the differentiation. There's obviously a debate among some Catholic boards about the naming of the well, I'm going to call them gay straight alliances, but the groups of students who want to come together to support gay, lesbian, bi students. So that's within the Catholic system. That's not within the public system. But the reality is that all of those boards are required to allow students to form those groups if they choose. The naming of them is another issue. I think it's much more to do with the individuals in a school. Are there a few people in a school who actually understand these issues and have done their own personal work? Are we giving teachers and administrators the opportunities to understand? Because I don't think we should expect that just because you're a teacher, you're going to understand homophobia or racism or sexism or any of those isms, you know? It's work that we have to do as human beings. It's an ongoing process. So I think it would be foolish of us to assume that just because someone's gone to teachers college that they've done that kind of self-examination.
Well, let me follow up with Thomas on that. We almost think it's part of being a Canadian to be tolerant. Are we as tolerant as we think we are?
I think we have a reputation for being tolerant. And in comparison to quite a few other countries, I would say we are doing quite well.
Sure, but are we as tolerant as we think we are? I'd like to think we are.
I don't think so.
You don't think we are?
I don't think so.
Fred,
I think we still have a long way to go.
How about you, Fred?
Absolutely, we are a very tolerant society. I'm very proud of Canada. We've come a long way. As I said, you know, they were raiding gay bars when I was in university, and now same-sex marriage is legal. Wow, we've come a long way. This is a very, very tolerant society. I see it every day in the way we live. This is a pretty amazing country.
It is a tolerant society, relatively speaking, but are we as tolerant as we think we are? Jean-Paul,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I would venture to say that we are tolerant in terms of our legislator, our laws, everything that's concrete. In terms of personal reactions, personal opinions, I don't know that society's thoughts has changed as much as society's laws. And I would say, I would venture to say no. From personal experience, from experience of my friends, colleagues, I would venture to say no, I don't think we are.
Is it possible the legislators are ahead of public opinion on this
I
one?
think on this
I don't
issue,
believe that for a
yes.
minute.
I think collectively, I'd have to agree. I think collectively we are a very tolerant society. I think we are. In fact, I think we go beyond tolerance, and I think we are, we're a very accepting and open society. I don't think I'd be in elected office if that weren't the case, because I'm an out lesbian. I represent a very diverse riding in Toronto. People said to me I couldn't get elected. In every single election I've run in, and I've run in for as school trustee and MPP, homophobia has been an issue. I would suggest in this last provincial election, it was a high-profile issue.
Yeah.
And even still, that doesn't keep me from being elected. So I am very proud of the progress that we've made. I think we've come a long way. Can it be better?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Fred, you want in?
Well, I got to say, I'm a gay conservative, and I got to tell you, I've been treated with amazing respect by all the conservatives I work with on a daily basis. Tolerance, respect, I get that on a personal basis from the conservatives I meet.
Okay, I wasn't going to go here, but you do know that your party put out a pretty controversial piece of literature in the last couple of weeks of the campaign that many people thought was pretty homophobic. You standing by that?
I'm not sure which piece you're talking about. I wouldn't say it's my party, but...
Okay, it was a Toronto thing, so maybe it didn't happen in Ottawa. Let me move on here. You know that I guess it was about a year ago we did a program on It Gets Better, which is this campaign in the start of the United States, which is really quite something about sending the message forward to young gay people that hang in there. It does get better. And I want to play a little clip of that, and then we'll come back and talk. This is Susan Magerman, who's a teacher with the Triangle Program, Toronto District School Board, who had this to say about that. Michael, roll tape, please. Does it really get better?
I think...
After high school, does it really get better?
I think it can get better. I think it can. I'm not going to say that it always gets better, but I think for many it does get better. But I think you have to be connected to the right people and the right services. I think that's crucial in it getting better.
So let's do our little survey today. Jean-Paul, does it get better?
Yes.
It does.
Yeah. Do you want me to? I mean, it gets better, but there's also a responsibility to make it better.
What does that mean?
That means that I love the intention of that campaign in the idea of instilling hope from personal, concrete experiences that it does get better. But that is not where the job finishes. It begins there. Then it's our job as adults in our society to make it better for these young teens.
Thomas, you got hit in the head with a shovel, so I presume things have improved since then.
Oh, things have improved greatly. But I completely echo your sentiment here. I love this campaign because it shows it gives young people role models. It tells them that the person I am, the person that I've discovered I am, I do have potential. I do have a life ahead of me. So in that sense, it is a wonderful, wonderful campaign. It's falling short one step, and that's exactly our responsibility, I believe, to say, let's not wait until it gets better, but let's make it better. As a society, what can we do? What bridges can we build? How can we make this better for LGBT students, for any student?
Some of our viewers won't know what LGBT means.
Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender
Okay.
students.
Fred, does it get better for gay conservatives even?
Absolutely, it gets better for all gay people. By the way, I mean, the real challenge here, puberty is a really tough situation for all males, straight or gay. All of them have trouble with that, and we have to help all of them regardless of their sexual orientation. It does get better, you know it.
I'd say puberty's not a great time for anybody.
For anybody.
No. Male, female.
Well, I think particularly males. Again, I think there's some particular male issues here, and that shows in the suicide rate. And that's the big elephant that this group, the Minister of Education, is not addressing, the fact that most teenage suicides are male.
First of all,
boys.
she's not the minister anymore, just for what it's worth. She's not the Minister of Education anymore. However,
well,
we started off this program with a little clip of Rick Mercer doing his rant, and it focused on one aspect of what he perceives to be the problem. I want to play the second part of his rant right now, because he does address something that, in fact, Kathleen Wynne, it's perfect that you're here for this, because this is, well, this is another part of what he wanted everybody to focus on. Michael, if you would, roll tape.
It's no longer good enough for us to tell kids who are different that it's gonna get better. We have to make it better now. That's every single one of us, every teacher, every student, every adult has to step up to the plate. And that's gay adults too, because I know gay cops, soldiers, athletes, cabinet ministers, a lot of us do, but the problem is, adults, we don't need role models. Kids do. So if you're gay and you're in public life, I'm sorry, you don't have to run around with a pride flag and bore the hell out of everyone, but you can't be invisible, not anymore.
What do you think?
Well, you know, I'm a gay cabinet minister, so I'm out, and
But they aren't all out.
They aren't all out.
And we know who, and the funny thing is, you and I both know who's still in.
Yep.
I mean, people who follow this stuff knows who's still in.
Yep. Yeah. So I guess, yes, I really relate to what Rick is saying. And when I first watched it, that rant, I felt it, you know, it was a very emotional experience. But at the same time, much as I would like to stand on the rooftops and say, just come out, we have to respect people's own process, you know? I mean, there are adults who are my age who, if they came out, they couldn't go home for Christmas, you know? Or they, you know, they would be afraid they couldn't go home for Christmas, or they'd be afraid that their parents would be so demoralized that they wouldn't be able to talk with them. So I think we have to be very careful that we don't make a blanket requirement across people.
He just did.
I know he did, and I love him for it. I think it's a great message, and certainly I have tried in my life to model that. The first speech I made in the legislature, my maiden speech, I talked about my responsibility to the various groups of people, and one of those groups were young lesbians, you know, who need to know where their trajectory could lead them. So I feel very passionately about that, but I also respect that people live in different circumstances.
Have you, since you know who's gay and who's still inside, have you gone to any of their colleagues on the other side of the floor, federally, provincially, whatever, municipally? Have you had any conversations with any of them and said, you know what, it's time?
I haven't had it in that way. I've had conversations about why you're not out, you know, and what it is about your life that that might require you to be in. But I haven't made that judgment to say, you know, well, you should
to do so.
Yeah, I think that it is a very individual thing, and I think our responsibility is to make it safer for the young people coming along, never to have to be in the deep dark closet that many adults continue to be in.
John Paul?
So yes, here it is. You have your own life and your own personal decisions, and you have to respect people's comfort, safety, and what they feel is right for them.
I hear a but coming.
But here's the second level. When does that, the ability to prevent future generations from facing discrimination, persecution, and oppression override that personal need? And I think that is the question that is at the core of at this debate.
You think that's where we're at today? That things have gotten so serious for gay teens that it's no longer a choice? Public officials have to come out?
No, I think it's a choice in terms of, am I in such danger? Am I at risk of facing such discrimination that I'm not going to be honest and authentic with who I am because of this? That's where I think it is. That's where I think it's a big decision these days, yes.
Thomas, on the rant, do you agree with Rick Mercer that it's time? People have got to come out? It's just that serious?
It is certainly a serious problem, but I'd also like to preserve a person's choice to say, I am not ready yet. I want to preserve that right. What we as a society are responsible for is creating a climate, be it in schools, be it in senior citizens' homes, where it is safe for a person to come out should they wish to do so.
Let me read this on the screen. This just came up because we're getting live tweets as this thing goes along. I don't think anyone should be forced out of the closet, this person writes, but I do think less of those adults who won't come out. That's a judgment out there. It's interesting. The judgment 10 years ago might have gone the other way.
Right, and that's, you know, that's one of the choices, that's one of the factors that you take into account when you decide to come out or not. Who's going to think?
Again, though, what I'd like to add is, from my own personal experience, in hindsight, I can say, well, having grown up the way I did grow up, there was a lot of internalized homophobia that I wasn't even aware of. And that also prevented me for a number of years to take that step and come out. And even when I joined the Toronto Police Service years ago as an openly gay recruit, as soon as I went into Ontario Police College, I went back into the closet.
And
because I was so afraid.
It was too tough to live in.
I was so afraid.
Let me get Fred wants in on this too. Go ahead, Fred.
Well, I think what Rick says that's really important is we need more male role models for all youth. And that's the problem in this feminized society. We don't have enough good male role models. I mean, male traits like courage and bravery, we don't hear about this at all. You want a role model? Take your voluntary firemen across the country.
Fred?
How about the soldiers who serve in Afghanistan? The only time we hear about them is when they get killed in that country. We don't hear about the daily acts of courage they do every single day. We need more male role models for everybody.
Fred, at the risk of taking this program off into a direction we didn't intend it to go on, what do you mean in this feminized society?
Well, I think this could be a whole other show.
Exactly.
But I think, I think there's a lack of male role models that emphasize some very, very important male traits: courage, bravery. We just don't hear about that, and we don't hear about the stories.
Those are not
of some of
uniquely
the
male traits.
role models in this country.
Sorry. Well, okay. I am going to get concerned here that we're going to go off in a different way, but those aren't uniquely male traits. Anyway, you wanted to say
Well, I think that gender analysis is really not something that I can ascribe to. But anyway, I wanted to say that there are varying degrees of out. And, there are people who, I have friends who have said to me after, they've been lesbians for 40 years, and they say, I'm still in the closet. And I'm thinking, you think you are? You actually think you're in the closet?
Because you're actually not.
Because you're actually not in the closet. Everybody knows.
Well, that's an interesting distinction is between being out and coming out, right?
Exactly. Because people know.
Do we really need to have?
Do we need to have what?
Do we really need to have gay role models? I mean, I'm gay and I'm Jewish. Do I have to have gay Jewish role models?
I think we do
what
need.
About Terry Fox?
Yeah, I think.
Isn't Terry Fox a great role model for all Canadians?
No.
Sure, that's besides the point.
I can tell you for a fact, I'll give you a personal experience. We need gay role models. Living on the street in North Toronto, my partner Jane and I, who, by the way, knew she was different when she was 6, so she and I had very different lives. But young woman down the street came out when she was about 22 and said to us that it helped her so much to even know that we existed. People in my ministries, as a politician, have come up to me and said just quietly, it makes such a difference that you're out. Absolutely, we need gay role models. People need to see themselves reflected. Men and women need to see themselves reflected.
Yeah. Let's look at the other side of this equation, because when Rick Mercer did come out with this, you people in public life, it's no longer an option, you got to do it, people are dying. The Globe and Mail ran this as an editorial. Let's bring this up, Michael. There are many reasons why some gay cops, soldiers, athletes, and politicians might wish not to be open about their orientation. They may consider it a private matter, they have entered these professions for the same reason anyone else has, and wish to pursue them in the same way, without differentiating themselves in a way that may feel to them irrelevant. They may even be out to the people who know them well. Would every gay person now need to hold a news conference? What Mr. Mercer is saying amounts to this. It falls to successful gay adults to protect vulnerable gay teens from the problems associated with being different. He's wrong. The job of protecting gay teens or anyone else from bullying falls to everyone.
Listen, that's a very nice thought, but you cannot expect the majority to fight for the rights of a minority. the job of the minority and the people in that community to make their cause known. So it's very nice to say that everyone should love each other, everyone should be fighting for each other's cause, but the reality is when it comes to the rights of a minority, the people in that community have to stand up and fight for themselves.
Fred?
Look, I think everybody has to stand up. I mean, one of my biggest champions is my sister in Boston, who's straight, happily married. I mean, boy, she goes to bat for me all the time in her community. It's great. I think we need everybody to stand up, not just gay people, and I think they have, which is why things have gotten so much better.
Thomas?
I do agree that probably our straight allies, the most influential group in all of this. And I'd like to give you a personal example. Again, when I started work at my first division, to which I was assigned as a police officer a while ago, I was afraid. People knew I was coming in as this gay recruit, as this gay officer. People knew about that. But I was not at a stage where I was comfortable disclosing that myself and making my life part of everyone else's life. For instance, when the platoon came back after a number of days off work, people were telling, well, I did this with my wife. I took my girlfriend to Canada Wonderland. And I always said, I did this, I did this, I did this.
Without indicating?
Without indicating with my partner. And then I had one staff sergeant, and I will thank him for the rest of my life, because he challenged me by saying, Tom, what did you and your partner do? In front of everybody.
In front of others.
Yes. And I was already out, but not, as you said, there are levels of being out. And that was a friendly challenge. It was a friendly challenge, and it normalized my life in the context of everyone else's.
And I think if you mesh what Rick's saying and with what the Globe is saying, what you come up with is everybody who can should support. Everybody who can come out should come out, I think. And can is taking in all the kinds of things that Jean-Paul was talking about. Is it safe? You know, are you going to find a place where you'll be accepted? Everybody who can be an ally should do that, because that's the way we will make progress, by everyone who is able to standing shoulder to shoulder.
Do not misinterpret this as in any way being disrespectful. I think it's wonderful. You're a cabinet minister, you're on television, you're in the clergy, a gentleman who runs a film society in Ottawa. Would it be better if we had some hockey players on that list, or hip-hop artists?
I think everybody who can. Absolutely, absolutely. Because those are where the stereotypes, and so the sports heroes who have come out, the athletes who have come out, I think have taken huge risks. And that does speak often to male culture, but to female culture as well. You know, it's a big risk.
Here's one that's just come up as well.
I agree that...
Sorry, one sec, Fred. I'm just going to read this one here. Nobody should have an obligation to come out, but everyone should get involved when you see someone being bullied or harassed. I think everybody can sign on to that. We've been getting these messages either on our live chat or on Twitter throughout the campaign, throughout the.
And that's a really good point. That coming out is very different than taking a stand if someone's being injured or someone's being harassed or bullied. Yeah.
Sorry, Fred. You wanted to say.
Well, I think it's important for sports people and hip hop artists, people in the black community to come out, and it's starting. You see the San Francisco Giants did a whole video. It gets better. A whole baseball team. That was really nice to see. But I'd also like to see. I'd love to see Justin Bieber basically tell everybody, hey, it's cool to be gay. That would do just as much as for somebody to come out.
Jean-Paul, again, it seems like I'm picking on you, but you're the closest to teenager here of anybody at the table.
Sure,
so,
I'll take it.
Do gay teenagers need gay role models?
Yes,
they do.
I don't even know why that's a discussion.
Because Fred says it's not necessarily so. Terry Fox is good enough.
No, it's not. With something that you identify so closely with as your sexuality, to not have that representation that in people that are older than you and seeing that your life can continue in a positive way, it's so important. And the idea, yes, there are role models from every community that are great, of course, and you can take and pick and choose. But to have that specific type of role model is crucial to a young person's development.
Because as a teenager, you're asking, what's my life going to be like? What are the possibilities for me? Can I have a family? Can I have children? Can I have any career that I want? Where can I live? Those are all questions that kids, any kid, is struggling with. So if you never see yourself in a place that you'd like to be, that can be scary, and it can create a less safe growing up.
Fred?
I disagree with that. I think that, again, I'm gay. I'm also Jewish. I'm an atheist too. I don't really need to have a gay, Jewish, atheist role model. I'm many things. I need to have role models that show courage, bravery, a whole variety of very, very positive traits. And there are lots of gay role models already there. So I'm not opposed to having gay role models. It's just that I want role models for males. I want role models that show courage, compassion, intelligence.
I hear you, Fred. Would you say your view is typical?
I don't know. I'm probably on here because I'm not typical. I don't know.
Thomas?
I think we're missing an important aspect here. Role models are one thing, and they're absolutely necessary. And there are Jewish role models out there. There are Christian role models out there. There are role models that show our racial diversity. These role models do exist. Up until very recently, there wasn't a lot in terms of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender role models.
Who would you say is one?
A role model?
Yeah, if you were...
My current boss, Reverend Brent Hawkes, great role model.
Yeah. Okay.
Helen Kennedy as the executive director of EGAL Canada, wonderful role model.
How about in sports, or I think maybe we have one at the table here in politics? How about sports, athletics, show business? I mean, these are obviously very influential people if you're young and growing up in...
Well, I'm a bit at a loss when it comes to sports, so I can't think of one right.
Well, let me put an example on the table here. How about this? There's a guy who, I think he just got waived through the NHL, so I think he might be back. Sean Avery is his name. And he's a hockey player who's a real pest. He's a real mischief maker. But the fact is, he did come out defending gay marriage and took an enormous amount of flack for it from, even though he plays in New York, he took an enormous amount of flack for it from a lot of people. Fair to say that it's not just gay people who run the risk of coming out with their opinions.
Absolutely.
Heterosexuals have the same problem.
Absolutely, and that's homophobia at work, right? It's the same force. It's just in a different manifestation. But I think role models can be those big people, can be those stars, but to have role models closer to home too, in your community, to be part of a community where there's acceptance. And I think the other ingredient is to have people around you who love you in an unqualified way, because you may actually live someplace where there aren't any local role models, and to have that unqualified love from, ideally parents, but aunts, uncles, other adults, somebody needs to love you and reinforce that you're a good person.
Are you a role model, do you think? You got a TV show, you're on TV.
Right.
Gay teens watch your show.
Yeah. I mean, it was never our intention when creating the program to create a set of role models. We just wanted to authentically portray gay men living honest lives and having honest discussions. As a result of that, yes, some role models have been created, and I take that responsibility with, it weighs a lot on me. So it's very present in my mind.
Do you hear from gay teens?
Every day.
Every day?
Every day in
person.
person.
What do they tell you?
It's pretty overwhelmingly positive. It's just that the common message is that they are so thankful that they have someone to identify with that is on somewhat of a pedestal, right?
You get negative feedback from straight teens?
No. Oh, straight teens are probably just as supportive of our show as gay teens. The common thought around everyone is just it's helpful to see young people on television representing this often marginalized and misrepresented community.
Fred, at the risk of incurring your wrath again, do you think you're a role model?
Well, I think I am. I mean, I have a blog called Gay and Rights, and I get three types of email. I get conservatives who are upset that I'm gay. I get gay people who are upset that I'm conservative. And I get a whole bunch of gay conservatives who are going, wow, I found you.
And you haven't even mentioned the atheism yet. That's another story.
Well.
Okay,
Comes
I want to ask Kathleen Wynne a question here, and this is going to take a bit of a setup, so get comfortable here. We first had you on this program, I think 5 years ago when you first got appointed as the Minister of Education, and it was one of those, kind of interviews where it's meet the new minister and all of that kind of stuff. So it wasn't strictly about policy, but it was also a bit about your life. And we had quite a discussion around our editorial table as to whether or not we should ask you about your sexual orientation, which I think we knew, but not everybody knew. You weren't as out back then as you are right now. And we wondered, is it an inappropriate breach of her privacy to ask her about this, given that it was going to be an interview that would touch on personal matters? You were out, but not George Smitherman out, if I can put it that way. So the question is, should we have asked?
Yes. So I had already made my maiden speech. I was out in the legislature.
I don't think the pictures of you and Jane were on your website yet.
Maybe not.
Because
I
that's
can't
the
remember
first thing
exactly
we did.
the
We looked at the
timing.
website and said, there's no reference on the website, there's no pictures, so I guess we can't go there.
Yeah. So yes, I wish you'd asked, because, I remember that conversation, and I wouldn't have come into it saying, and I'm the first lesbian cabinet minister in
But you
Ontario.
were.
I was, and I had
Openly.
acknowledged that in my openly lesbian. I had acknowledged that in my maiden speech. But yes, I wish you had asked, and probably what we should have done is had a conversation before. I should have had that conversation with your producer, and they could have asked me, is it okay to talk about this?
I was even too nervous to do that.
Really?
I was too nervous to bring it up with you personally ahead of time, as I always do, chat with a guest before the program, because I just thought, if the answer is no, then it's going to be in the back of her head and it's going to screw up the whole interview.
Right, yeah.
So I didn't do it. But I should have done it.
Well, it would have been fine, and I would have appreciated the opportunity.
Live and learn.
There you go.
Here we go.
Wow.
Well, it does raise an interesting question. Thomas, when are you just an individual, and when are you a gay individual?
How can you separate the two from one another?
Well, that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah. Because I don't get up in the morning and turn on my gayness, and at night before I go to bed I turn it off. This is who I am, and the question once again, or our responsibility once again, is as a society what needs to happen is that a person doesn't have to feel they need to be turning off their being gay. That is the issue.
How about you?
Do I turn it off?
No. When are you just Jean-Paul individual guy on TV?
Yeah.
And when are you Jean-Paul self-identifying gay individual whom everybody knows that way?
Look, it's so tied. It's closely tied to who I am. There is not a day that goes by that I don't think about it, that I don't think about the work being done, truly and honestly, because it's such at the surface of our society's thought right now that for me to kind of sever that gay and individual, I don't even know if it would be possible for me.
Fred, how about you on that?
I'm just me, and I think we're all individuals, and that means that your gayness, so-called gayness, will play a varying role depending on the individual.
Yeah, I think being an integrated human being is about that. I mean, if I were to turn the question around to you, Steve, and say, when are you heterosexual, Steve Paikin, when are you,
I think it's different because being heterosexual, you're not part of a minority
it's
group.
Marked, yeah. So being gay is the marked characteristic. No, I get that. But at the same time, if you are integrated, if you bring your whole self to everything you do, then there isn't that division. And so if the conversation that you and I had however many years ago, had been just about, so how does this work affect your family life? And you and Jane, how do you work out the balance as a cabinet minister? That would have been a way to have a conversation without. So Kathleen, you're
what's
gay.
It like to be gay?
Well, we take out the garbage in the morning, just like everybody else,
This
right?
is exactly what we are depriving our LGBT students of. We are not allowing them to become fully integrated people.
Okay. That's got to be the last word. I want to thank all of you for a really fascinating and engaging discussion here, starting with Fred Litwin from the Free Thinking Film Society in the nation's capital. Fred, thank you for being there on the line with us.
Thank you. You're welcome. It was great.
Thanks also to Kathleen Wynne, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Aboriginal Affairs Minister, and congratulations, incidentally, on your personal re-election as the MPP for Don Valley West. Jean-Paul Bevilacqua, and yes, that's another political name. Maurizio Bevilacqua is your dad, the mayor of Vaughan, that city north of Toronto.
Yep.
MTV Canada's One Girl, Five Gays, that's his TV show. And Tom Decker, from everybody's favorite church in downtown Toronto. We thank all of you for being on our program tonight.